Hey everybody, and welcome to the next edition of the Soccer Fitness Goals video blog. As you may remember from last week, I mentioned that I recently returned from presenting research at the 5th World Conference on Science and Soccer in Rennes, France. And last week the topic of the blog was regarding the conference, and we're going to go ahead and continue to talk about the conference this week and in the next other couple of blogs for the next few weeks. But what we're going to shift our focus to now is the actual research that myself and the group that represented my company, Soccer Fitness, as well as my colleague Farzad Yousefian and his company, Sport Performance Analytics, Inc. So we're going to discuss in each of the next 3 weeks one of the 3 research projects that we presented at the conference. This week we're going to start with a comparison between speed and high-intensity running ability of Canadian and Uruguayan professional academy soccer players. So this study was really interesting and also very important to me because it allowed me to make some comparisons from fitness assessment data taken from 2 of the higher level environments that I've been fortunate enough to work in the past few years. On the Canadian side, it was from the Toronto FC Academy teams, and the Uruguayan players were from the club that I worked with last year called Canadian SC, which is a professional club in the Uruguayan second division. And in addition to the work that I got to do with the first team from that club, myself and Farzad Yousefian got to conduct fitness assessments and collect data on all of their academy players as well. So this study compared speed scores in 3 different speed tests, the 10, 20, and 35 meter sprint times, and also scores in the yo-yo intermittent recovery test, which, again, I'm biased, but is still the greatest way to assess aerobic and anaerobic power in soccer players. Anyway, we compared these test data among all of the different academy teams, starting from the U14 or under 14 age category all the way up to the senior academy teams, which would amount to something like an under 20 or under 21 team. And some of the results that we got from this comparison were not really surprising. For example, in both Canada and Uruguay, as you progress through the age groups from U14 and onward, the speed scores got a little better, so players got a little faster, and the yo-yo scores also got a little higher, so their aerobic power also improved. However, there were a few things that were surprising. So first I'll just list them out for you, and then we'll wrap it up by giving my opinion as to maybe why this was the case. Firstly, in every age category except for the senior academy category, Canadian players had faster speed times and a higher yo-yo score than Uruguayan players. So that's the first thing that was maybe a little surprising. The second thing that was surprising was that in the senior academy age category, the opposite was true. So in the senior category, the Uruguayan academy players had faster sprint times and a better yo-yo score than the senior Canadian academy players. And finally, not only were the senior Canadian academy players slower and less fit than the Uruguayan senior players, they were also slower and less fit than the next oldest age Canadian players, which were U17 and 18. So those are the 3 things that came out of the data that we took that were a little bit surprising. So as any good sports science researcher would do, I'm going to attempt to discuss and draw some conclusions from this data. But there has to be a disclaimer, and that is that these conclusions that I'm drawing aren't really based on scientific evidence. They're based on my opinion of the evidence from the research that we conducted. And I like to qualify some of the statements that I make that way, just so that everyone who's watching understands that I'm not really presenting this as fact. The facts that I've presented have already been presented. Right now I'm just going to give some of my opinions of conclusions that might be able to draw on based on these facts. So first of all, why is it that Canadian academy or Canadian professional academy players are faster and have a higher yo-yo score, so they're fitter than Uruguayan professional academy players in our study? I think there are 2 potential reasons for this. The first would be that overall, based on my experience, having worked at the high level in both Canada and Uruguay, that I think in Canada and in North America in general, I've seen more of an emphasis placed on speed, strength, and endurance training. So really on physical training in youth soccer as well as in other youth sports. More of an emphasis in Canada and North America than in Uruguay. I did notice in Uruguay that although many of the coaches and fitness coaches that work there are very knowledgeable about sports science and fitness training, that there certainly isn't the amount of attention or focus being given towards fitness and physical training as there is in Canada. I think that overall what I noticed was that the majority of the youth coaches in Uruguay were focused a lot more, primarily on tactics, actually, on really getting kids to understand the game and improve their tactical performance, and secondarily on technique. So that's one potential reason. The other potential reason is that there may be a selection bias amongst the Toronto FC Academy and potentially amongst other high-level Ontario and even Canadian youth professional academies. And that bias would be towards players that are faster, bigger, stronger, have higher speed and better aerobic fitness. So it's possible that the scouts or the coaches that are identifying players for these programs in Canada are a little bit biased or a little bit skewed towards selecting players that have better physical quality and physical ability. And again, based on my limited experience in Uruguay, it didn't really look like that was the case over there. It really looked like that the coaches and the scouts were trying to make decisions based on technical and tactical ability. A lot more research into this topic is definitely warranted before any definitive conclusions can be made about that point. So I would group the last two of the three surprising points from the data that we took in our study together, only because I think the explanation or potential explanation for them might be a little similar. And the questions would be, why is it that in the senior age category, the Canadian professional academy players were slower and less fit than the younger or next youngest Canadian academy team, which was the under 19, which was also made up of some under 18s, but under 18 and under 19. And also, why were they slower and less fit than the Uruguayan senior academy players? And again, I think the potential reason for both of these questions, or the potential answer to both of these questions, is the same. And that is that, unfortunately, in Canada, because we don't have our own Canadian professional soccer league yet, it's coming, but we don't have it yet, and we certainly didn't have it at the time that this data was collected, that Canadian soccer players, even those that are in a professional academy like the TFC Academy, once they get beyond that under 18 or under 19 age category, which is when they're graduating high school, if they have not at that point in their soccer career made it into the reserve or the first team with the professional club with TFC, then they end up getting into the university or the college system, whether that's in the States or in Canada. But really what happens is, I think that their motivation significantly decreases. And that affects their motivation to train. It affects their motivation to watch what they eat, to be committed to a practice schedule, and really to maintain or build or improve on their fitness. Physiologically, scientifically, any way you want to look at it, there's really no other way to explain why senior academy players that are maybe 19, 20, 21 years old are slower or have a lower yo-yo score, lower aerobic fitness than players that are 17 or 18. On the male side, it makes no sense. Older male players should have more muscle mass, more testosterone. They should have a little bit more training experience, in the weight room and things like that. So they should be faster and they should have a bit of a higher yo-yo score. We would expect those physical abilities in males, based on the research, to peak somewhere between the age of 22 to 25. So Canadian players that don't get into a professional environment by that age, I think, unfortunately, they lose some of their motivation and they get out of shape. And on the other hand, Uruguayan players that are still in a professional academy in those age categories, or still somehow connected to a professional club, there's so many options for them. So it's not just one club like TFC. In a big city like Montevideo, there's dozens of professional clubs. And so an Uruguayan player in those age categories, 17, 18, 19, 20, even 21, even if they haven't made it all the way as a professional yet, they're still going to be very motivated to stay in shape, to live a professional soccer player's lifestyle, and to train really hard. And so, again, these are my opinions, but they're my opinions based on my experience having worked at a high level in both those countries. And so maybe a lesson to be taken from this data is that it would be imperative for Canada to launch this CPL, this Canadian Premier League, the Canadian Professional Soccer League, as soon as possible, so that all of our high-level players that don't become a professional right away at the age of 16 or 17, that they still have incentive and they still have something to look forward to that will keep them motivated, keep them in shape, keep them training hard, and not cause this discrepancy in fitness scores like we saw from our data. So that's it for the Soccer Fitness Goals video blog for this week. Hope you enjoyed it. Please remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. You can also click on the link below me to download the Soccer Fitness Goals mobile fitness app, which is the world's only soccer-specific, customized at-home training program for a soccer player or soccer enthusiast of any age or level of ability. I'll also mention that last week we put up the link to my website, the Our Research page, where you can have a look at the posters and abstracts that we presented in our study. We'll put that link up below me now here if you'd like to have a look at the poster from the study that I referenced in this blog. We'll see you next week, and until then, keep reaching your soccer fitness goals.